Welcome to Mission 360, where we connect you to the frontline missionaries. Today we will explore the West Central Africa region. This is located on the western point of Africa. It's composed of 22 countries with a population of 350 million people. Wow, that's almost as many as the inhabitants of the United States.
That's big. You know, in this region, Christianity is a relative newcomer, while Islam is the main religion. The Seventh-day Adventist Church in West Africa has a church membership of almost 9,000 people who worship at 3,400 churches.
There are also 3 Adventist universities in that territory, one of which is the top 3 in the denomination by enrollment. Imagine 8,000 plus students.
On episode 8 of our season, we will get to visit Babcock University. To begin, let's watch a movie and see what it's like in West Africa.
Welcome to the West Central Africa region. If you look at a map of the African continent and find the Sahara Desert, you will find below it most of the territory known as the West Central Africa Division. The West Central Africa Division territory stretches from Cape Verde to Congo-Brazzaville and from Senegal to the Central African Republic. Countries in this division include Ghana, Nigeria, and Cameroon, as well as Burkina Faso, Mauritania, and Mali. The rich history of this area has made it one of the most culturally diverse regions of the world. Originally home to African tribal and language groups, it was influenced by traders and settlers from the north, coming from as far away as Constantinople, known today as Istanbul, Turkey. Later Europeans colonized this territory. The British, French, Germans, and Portuguese all left their mark. Today you can see how the religious landscape of this territory has been shaped by history, with a strong Muslim presence in the north and a mix of traditional African religions and Christianity in the south. This is a challenging region for the Adventist Church. Yet despite the challenges, the Adventist Church is growing. Today there are some 866,000 Seventh-day Adventists worshiping in nearly 3,500 churches. Yet with a population of more than 360 million, there is still much to be done.
The challenges are many. We don't want to call them problems, we call them challenges because we see in them an opportunity for God to manifest His glory. So those challenges are rather opportunities.
No matter what you call them, they make sharing the gospel more difficult. Many areas of the world face challenges, but one challenge they face here is impacted by geography and climate.
This part is dominantly covered by Sahara Desert, and therefore you have what I call physical or environmental challenge. You have a lot of drought here because it doesn't rain much.
The lack of rain brings unique challenges to a church that baptizes by immersion. In some areas, there is not enough water to hold a baptism until the rains come.
It's very difficult to take care of the people because sometimes they have drought and they can't harvest any crop, and you have to minister to them. And when it starts raining, it rains more than enough, so you have flooding. So the little that they have grown got devastated by flood.
The environment isn't the only challenge. Christians are a minority here.
Muslims constitute 50% of the population, and the African traditional religions, they constitute about 20% of the population. So you can see that already we have 70% of people who don't know anything about Jesus at all.
Although only about 20% of the population practices traditional African religions, its influence is still very much a part of the culture. Many Christians and Muslims still follow some of the practices of the African religions. Because Christianity is a minority religion, public evangelism is not welcome in many communities. Recognizing how daunting the challenges are, Adventist leaders in West Africa decided to place it in God's hands.
So we took God to task, praying and telling God, you said it, and we know that you are faithful. We know that when you say it, you will make it happen. Honor your word. Make it happen. And we have witnessed some wonderful changes in this division.
That was amazing. Can you believe that 70% of the people in this region don't know anything about Jesus?
It's hard to understand this picture. Perhaps if we look at the history there, we will understand more. Gary Krause is in the studio with Dr. David Trim from ASTR.
Dr. David Trim, thank you so much for joining us. You work in the Office of Archives, Statistics and Research. What sort of work do you do there?
We deal with the records, the archives of the General Conference. We also collect data on its membership, the number of churches, companies, the number of employees, the number of ministers, for example, so statistics. And we do research as well, research on the history and the statistics, but also some research on what can make the church more efficient and more effective in its ministry and its mission.
Great, so when somebody comes and just out of the blue says to you, please tell us about the history of West Central Africa and the Adventist Church, you're well prepared, right?
I can prepare at least. And on this occasion I have prepared because something told me you might ask me that question.
Okay. So West Central Africa, the headquarters are in Abidjan in the Côte d'Ivoire.
Indeed.
But it's a very large, diverse territory.
It's a huge territory, Gary, and is our most challenging, most difficult area to work in Africa. Because of the nature of the cultures there, because Islam is very strong there, and also there's a linguistic divide. West Central Africa was colonized mostly by the British and the French. And so the languages that get imported and imposed and to some extent still are used there are British and French. Whereas, for example, much of the territory of the Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division is English speaking. They have a small French speaking section, but it's sort of easier. So West Central Africa has got problems dealing with world religions, dealing with the linguistic divide within the church, but also the fact that this is the poorest part of Africa, which is, of course, not the world's richest continent to begin with.
Exactly. And of course, their first contact with Christianity was with colonization and with slavery.
Indeed, going all the way back to the 16th century. But fortunately, the church has managed to overcome some of those negatives. And it is interesting where Adventism first arrives in the country that today is called Ghana, but was then called the Gold Coast, a British colony, and it was called the Gold Coast because traders could get gold there, but it distinguished it from the slave coast, where Europeans went to trade in slaves. Ghana, they went to trade in gold, though in the end they traded for slaves there as well, because Europeans traded for slaves all around West Africa. But the first Adventist presence in what is now the West Central Africa Division comes in 1888, when a local African man, Francis Dolphin, reads Adventist literature. The International Tract Society, an Adventist organization at the time, had sent literature with sea captains and asked them to distribute it, which seems like, it's a bit of a risk. Is anyone going to read it?
Right.
But this local Ghanaian man, Francis Dolphin, read it. He was converted and he became a Sabbath keeper. And he writes to Adventist church leaders in America and says, this is the situation. And in 1892, a man called Lawrence Chadwick, who was president of the International Tract Society and traveled widely trying to distribute literature, went to the city of Apam in the Gold Coast, or Ghana, and spent some months there with Francis Dolphin. And at the next General Conference session in 1893, he said, we have to send missionaries to West Africa. And so 1894, you get the first two missionaries. Their names are Edward Sanford and Carl Rudolph. And, we deserve to remember them because to be a missionary in West Africa, today it's not such a challenge, but the other huge challenge that operated then was disease. West Africa, much of it was
malarial.
But others too. Much of it was jungle, malaria, but also malaria at least could be treated with quinine.
Right.
Other diseases, there was simply no treatment at all. And the death rate among missionaries of all Christian churches, we know, is appalling, and Adventists suffer a lot. And so we find quite a steady flow of Adventist missionaries, partly because the first missionaries have to go back. Sanford and Rudolph, for example, one lasts only 12 months, the other less than 2 years before they have to be invalided home.
Now, did they go with families or just by themselves?
No, they often went with families. In 1895, you get 4 more missionaries, a man called Dudley Hale, who in 1897 baptized Francis Dolphin, the first baptism, Adventist baptism in West Africa, but also a man called G.P. Riggs and a married couple, George and Eva Kerr. And the Kerr's children, they had 2 children, both of them died in 1896. You know, Gary, we often forget what it meant to be a missionary in the early years of our church. It meant knowingly going into areas that were deadly dangerous in a way that today I don't think people can imagine, because you can be medevaced if you need to, and most diseases can be treated now. Even today, of course, as you know very well, going as a missionary can mean a huge deal of sacrifice and illness, but it literally was a deadly occupation in the 1890s, especially in West Central Africa. So that was the story. And throughout the early years, missionaries kept coming and missionaries kept dying. One of the most interesting stories is a man called C.E.F. Thompson. And there's a wonderful photograph of him. And he is interesting because he was a Jamaican. He was a black Jamaican. The church in Jamaica itself had only been founded in the early 1890s. But C.E.F. Thompson wants to be a missionary, and he goes. And the photograph, which your viewers will have hopefully seen by now, shows him dressed in a wonderfully natty suit. He looks very dapper, and yet he goes to this horrible fever-ridden country, and he worked there for 2 years, and in 1912 he too died.
Wow.
So even for people from a tropical, there were huge sacrifices involved, Gary, in planting our church in West Africa.
Yeah.
But the church has taken root there, and now it flourishes. And Ghana and parts of Nigeria, these are strongholds of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
What a wonderful story, and it's wonderful to remind ourselves of the sacrifice on which this church is built.
Amen.
David, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Gary. Thanks for having me.
We often forget what it means to be a missionary, to go into the difficult and challenging parts of the world, to share the love of Jesus.
Today in West Africa, Seventh-day Adventists are helping, healing, and teaching people. If you want to learn more and hear more amazing missionary stories, call us at 1-877-424-7457 or visit us online at www.m360.tv. We will send you this DVD, and it's absolutely free.
After the break, we'll meet Zachary, a strong missionary leader in West Africa. He's from the country of Niger, and he has at times in his life gone for 3 days without eating. He is a true West African, and you don't want to miss what he has to say.
Welcome back to Mission 360. The World Seventh-day Adventist Church is divided in 13 areas. It's part of our operational structure of 13 regions. Today we are visiting the West Central African region, so when you hear WAD, that's an abbreviation for West Central African Division or region.
Zachary is the mission leader for WAD, and he is in the studio to tell us more about the challenges in this area.
Pastor Zachary, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
You're welcome.
I want to talk to you about the territory where you come from, the West Central Africa region.
Yes.
I've had the privilege of visiting them many times, and it's an incredibly diverse territory. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the different cultures and countries and people?
Oh yes, the WAD is composed by 22 countries.
22.
Yes, many culture, many way of life, many things. So people who are living there, we have African traditional religions. Mm-hmm. We have some other religions, but people need Jesus Christ in this. People need Jesus Christ. It's why WAD try to do its best to share the gospel among them.
Now, you are the Adventist Mission Coordinator.
Yes.
So you are supervising global mission pioneers who are church planting. What sort of other mission activities are there in your territories?
Yes, the mission activity we have in our territory, first, we meet people with health ministry, education, and other departments. All we participate in this challenge. With health, we develop a strategy, a stop smoking plan to help people to stop smoking, to have good health, and also to have a relationship with their God. Because if we are healthy, we can practice our religion.
Yes.
And with education also, education is good, because without education we cannot do anything. We are here because of education, and education is a way to interact with people. As a global mission pioneer, we focus on education, on health, and all the departments were involved in this activity.
When you look at the mission work that you have in that territory, what are your biggest challenges?
Yes, our biggest challenge is to show Jesus to other people, because we have a big challenge with a kind of people in our division. It's part of 1040 window.
Yes.
And if we say 1040 window, it's a big challenge area. So it's the problem we have, how to interact with them, how to bring them to the hope of Jesus Christ. This is our, and we try to do our best to see which way we can interact with them as a friendship and coming close to them, showing Jesus to them, and so.
I've traveled sometimes to the Sahel region.
Yeah.
Which is a vast territory, very challenging territory, but it's also a very poor territory. Describe what life, I mean, you come from the country of Niger.
Yes.
Describe for our viewers what life is like in territories like the Sahel.
Yes, the big challenge we have in this Sahel, first, is poor countries.
Yeah.
People need food, they need clothes, they need many things. But they need also to have hope. Because most of them, they practice some religions that didn't give them hope. They are doing religious duty, but they don't know if they are safe or not.
Right.
So I think after food and everything, they need hope. So we focus on this hope, how to help them to meet Jesus Christ and to have salvation. Not for this world, for the hereafter.
Yeah. Now, some people viewing this program, that they realize that there are such things like mission offerings in the church to support mission around the world. And some people say, well, Africa can care for themselves now, or Asia can care for themselves. How do you respond when you hear people talking like that?
Yes, I think in the world we need each other. Even Africa is self-sufficient, and we are far for that. We are not self-sufficient. We need people. And through 13 Sabbath project and everything, we can help people in that area, because people are watching for them.
Yeah.
They are watching for us to receive something, and our contribution can help. Let's not say people can do things by themselves.
Right.
Yes, even they can do it. Jesus asked us to help, and we can help, and we'll grow together.
Because, I mean, you have people in your territory who'd be earning less than $1 a day.
Oh yes, we have some people who can pass 2-3 days without eating.
Yeah.
So it's unbelievable. It's very difficult to understand. But if you live the situation, you'll see it's a reality. So there's people, even we have some among them who can have food, who can have everything, because it's not everyone who is poor.
Right.
But the poorest are more than the one who can have sufficient food and everything.
Yeah.
So let's give without thinking about many things, but let's give because God asks us to help.
Yeah.
And through our help, we can save individuals.
Yeah.
We can save many people.
Yeah. Well, Pastor Zachary, I'm so glad that you were able to come and share with us today, and I'm
You're welcome.
so encouraged to hear about the holistic approach to mission in your territories, and thank you for the work that you're doing in challenging circumstances.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you very much.
We definitely need to support each other. Your mission offerings is one way, but there is also prayer. It doesn't cost a single penny, and it can accomplish unimaginable things.
So we invite you this week to pray for the region and for the leaders, governors, and the people.
The story you're about to see next is part of today's free offer. Call us and we'll send you this DVD.
Now let's visit two institutions in Senegal and Benin that are educating with excellence.
The country of Senegal on the western coast of Africa has the westernmost point on the African continent, and the capital Dakar is the westernmost city. This French-speaking country has a population of some 13.3 million people. More than 90% of the population is Muslim, with about 5% of the population being Christian. Like many countries today, the population is increasingly becoming urban. In Senegal, more than 42% of the population lives in cities, and urban population is growing each year. There are about 500 Seventh-day Adventists who gather each week in 6 churches and 2 companies. Like most Adventist churches in Africa, as you leave, you'll greet everyone who left before you and be greeted by everyone who comes out after you. Education is important and needed here. Only about half the population above the age of 15 can read and write. So Adventist schools that offer an opportunity for students to get a good education in a nice environment are attractive to many parents. Along the coast, fishing is an important source of food and income for some, and colorful boats are a familiar sight along the coast. The country of Benin is sandwiched between Nigeria on the east and Togo on the west. Some 9.8 million people live here. There are some 5,400 Seventh-day Adventists who gather each Sabbath to meet in one of the 43 companies and 16 churches, like this one in Parakou, a city of some 180,000 people in eastern Benin. It's an important market town and is the last stop on the railway line to Cotonou, the country's capital. French is the official language of Benin, and motorcycles are the primary means of transportation for many people, at least on land. When waterways are available, boats are an important means of transportation. Although some 42% of people in Benin are Christian, there are about 17% who practice voodoo, the traditional African religion. Depending on where you are from, the everyday things people do may be familiar, or they may be different from the way you do things. Everyday things like shopping, filling the car with gas or petrol, and preparing your food. We hope you have enjoyed visiting the West Central Africa Division and learning about the challenges and seeing how God has blessed. Thank you for your support of mission in West Central Africa and around the world. Please pray for the people here and for the mission challenges that still exist in this corner of Africa.
But we think that in God's appropriate time, He will give us the key to unlock that door, and we will enter with the gospel.
As you have seen, there is still a lot of mission work still to do.
We hope that you take part in supporting mission. To learn more about Adventist Mission, please call us at 1-877-424-7457 or visit us at adventistmission.org.
Mission 360 is not over yet. We'll see you right after the break.
On today's program, we've been looking at West Africa. And I can remember some years ago traveling to the country of Burkina Faso, where we had only just a handful of Seventh-day Adventist believers. And I'll never forget visiting with a global mission pioneer And with me was Dr. Mike Ryan, who at that time was the head of Global Mission. And the pioneer proudly presented his group of believers that he had led to Jesus. And they stood up and they sang for us. And it was very sincere, but the problem was it was in English, it was a Western hymn, and it was just very foreign for them. They did their best, but they were kind of limping along. And I'll never forget how Mike walked over to the pioneer and just quietly whispered in his ear. The pioneer smiled broadly, went back with his group, and they came back again, and this time they sang beautifully in their own language, their own song, and it had rhythm, it had harmony, and we were blessed. And it was a lesson to me about the importance of singing the song in the language of the people. We can't take a Western type of religion and impose it on other people. We take the principles and then they're applied within the local context. That's why the verse that we read in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 is so important, where the Apostle Paul says, I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. This isn't compromise. This is not letting down the standards. This is contextualizing the message so that it's attractive and believable and understandable. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Mission 360. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about mission. And if you want to find out more about Adventist Mission, just visit adventistmission.org. That's adventistmission.org. May God richly bless you, and I look forward to meeting with you next time right here on Mission 360.